Welcome to Better Than Ever Live for our last episode of 2021. Wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening, I hope you're making today and the rest of this year your masterpiece. My name is Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, regardless of injuries, and regardless of medical history. Very, very, very excited that you are here. Edgar, hello to you as well. I am thrilled to be here for this last 2021 episode. A lot of cool things coming for 2022 that I'll try to remember to talk about at the end of this show, but a lot of good stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about exercise, we're going to talk about sleep, we're going to talk about nutrition, we're going to talk about creating workout habits and gratitude and all kinds of good things. As always, everything that we talk about today, this is not medical advice. All of these studies, all of these opinions that I might share, I'm not giving you medical advice. This is meant for general information and medical education, so to speak. Those purposes only. I'm not giving you medical advice. If you have specific medical concerns, medical questions, please talk to your doctor. If you'd like to see me as a patient, either here in Charleston, South Carolina, or in Charlotte, North Carolina, go to my website, drdavidgeier.com. There's a contact link at the top of the page, and you can touch base with me that way, and we can work on setting up an appointment. But again, all sorts of good stuff to talk about today. Also, please, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, whether it's Spotify or Google or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or anywhere that you get your podcasts, the show is now up and running on all the podcast platforms. We had an issue with the feed for a little bit. That is now corrected. So if you want to listen to this at the gym, if you want to listen to this on your way to work or on the way home from work, you just like audio and you're not so interested in leaving comments about what we're talking about or asking questions, definitely subscribe to the podcast version. If you listen to this as a podcast and you do want to comment, join us at noon Eastern time on YouTube, on LinkedIn, or Facebook, and we would love to hear your thoughts there. All right, let's start with something that pertains to kids, but I want to talk about it as it pertains to adults. And that's a new study looking at desks at school and how they may be bad for kids' health and they may be bad for their performance in school. The study was published in the Journal of Occupational Therapy, Schools and Early Intervention, looking at 300 students between the ages of 5 and 12 and looking at how many of the kids, or how few of the kids apparently, actually have the right size desks. Now you may think, what in the world does this matter? And they found that these kids, the desks just didn't match the kids' height and just body size. 28% for males, 20% for females. Did the height of the seat match the kid's height? Less than half the seat depth matched. Elbow height to seat height, no match at all. It was terrible. And what they found is that it affected their performance in school, mostly because it hurt their attention. And it didn't matter if they were writing, reading, typing. They had pain, they had discomfort, and they couldn't pay attention, according to the authors, because the desk didn't match their size. And what they thought is, this isn't just a problem now, this is a problem down the road, that if you're sitting sort of twisted or hunched over, that could lead to long-term back issues. Obviously, we would need a study over many, many, many years to prove that. And I'll be honest, I'm a little skeptical. I think for the most part, kids are fairly resilient. No, ideally, for sure, you would love to have every desk perfectly match every student. I don't know what school that would be and what kind of budget they would have. I would think that would be fairly difficult. But why this interested me? Well, for one thing, somebody told me a few weeks ago that they wanted me to stop doing studies about kids' health because they are here to know how to improve their health. That, I always say, I'm here, I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injuries, all that kind of thing. And they don't really care about stuff that helps their kids' health. I don't know if that's true or not. But in terms of adults' health, desks are important as well. Maybe not the size of the desk and all that, and if you're having to hunch over, but generally, I'm a big believer you don't want to be sitting all that much anyway. So, and I haven't talked about it much here, but this, what you don't see it here, but right in front of me is a standing desk. At an office where I do a lot of my other work, I have a standing desk as well. I'm a big fan of anything that keeps you standing and not just sitting for long periods of time. Sitting is so bad for so many aspects of our health. Ideally, what's even better, if you can work this out, is some sort of treadmill desk. Now, I actually have a friend, I haven't kept up with her in a while, but she sort of made her own treadmill desk. It was like a real treadmill, and she built this sort of stand and she could walk on it. Now, you have to do it really slow. This is not walking 3 or 4 miles an hour like you do for exercise. You wouldn't be able to type or write. One of the challenges I have heard with people that have tried to build their own treadmill desks is that typical exercise treadmills are not designed to go that slowly for long periods of time. It burns up the motor. But there are desks specifically with treadmills meant for working on them with motors that do that better. Doesn't mean you couldn't do it with a regular treadmill, but you may have issues long term in keeping that treadmill working better. But I am a big fan of standing desks or treadmill desks if you can get them. If you're going to be sitting long periods of time, yes, try to adjust the height of the desk and chair and all that as best you can. But more importantly, get up and move frequently throughout the day. I think that will counter, in my opinion, the effects of sitting hunched over or an improper position better than, spending tons and tons of money getting the perfect desk, for what that's worth. All right. Moving on to adult issues, since people seem to want, or at least one person seems to want, less about kids and more about adults. Let's talk about when you go to bed and how well you sleep. We've talked a lot about sleep and its overall effect on mental performance and maybe some aspects of our physical health. A new study published in Diabetology, and I actually talked about this one on a TV interview not too long ago. When you go to bed and how you sleep actually might affect your ability to regulate your blood sugar with the meals the next day and basically affect your risk of type 2 diabetes down the road. Really interesting study. They took 2,500 people in the study and they had them wear these sleep trackers on their wrist, and they also wore these continuous blood glucose monitors that basically every 15 minutes show you your blood sugars so you can see how well your body handles a sudden load of blood sugar after a meal, because the higher that is for longer periods of time, the more at risk you are for type 2 diabetes, which is really bad for long-term health and longevity and things like that. And what they found is a couple things. Sleep was critically important actually to how your body deals with those blood sugars with the next morning meals. And they tried all different kinds of meals. The researchers did high-carb breakfast, they did high-fiber breakfast, medium fat and carb breakfast, and tested all those different types of diets and how you slept. Couple things about your sleep that were potentially really bad for that. Waking up a lot, interrupted sleep. Going to bed after midnight, very, very bad in terms of your body's ability to metabolize those blood sugars. Very variable sleep patterns. So maybe you went to bed at 10 o'clock one night, 1 a.m. the next night, you woke, had 4 hours of sleep one night, 7 hours of sleep, very variable sleep. All of those led it to be much, much harder to keep your blood sugars under control. So we always think of sleep as a mental performance and just how you feel, maybe mental health, but may actually be involved in things like longevity, like metabolic syndrome and obesity, and how you metabolize blood sugars, which can have a long effect on aging and longevity. So all of those are something worth paying attention to. I am a big fan of trying to go to bed at roughly the same time every night, waking up at the same time every morning. Weeknights and weekdays, weekend nights, weekend days, very, very important. It'll help you get ready so that you fall asleep quickly. It'll just get you in the habit of waking up the same time. Overall, your sleep quality will be good. You want to try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep if possible. Try to set your sleep as best possible with when it's light outside, waking up as the sunlight's starting to come up. All of those can be important for so many reasons, but for metabolic health, can be very, very important. All right, I became the medical expert for 2 TV stations here in Charleston around the time. It actually started before the COVID-19 pandemic, but then once that started, I've since basically March 2020, I've been on TV with those 2 stations multiple times every single day. Usually they'll run the segment multiple times. And a lot of what I have been talking about is COVID-19 related issues, all sorts of different topics related to the pandemic. And early on, one of the topics I talked about one day was, would we see an increase in babies and births related to the pandemic? Everybody was locked down, staying at home. Maybe we'd see more babies born 9 months later. That was the speculation. Turns out that doesn't seem to be the case. If anything, we have seen intimacy decline. 2 studies that seem to suggest it actually was the opposite. One, the National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyles COVID study. This is a British study, 6,500 people between the ages of 18 and 59, adults in the United Kingdom having much less sex since the lockdown started. Another one, and I did this one on TV as well, was a study done by Match.com. Men just aren't as interested in sex, and specifically casual sex, than they were before the pandemic. 81% of single men said that sex is less than important to them now than it was before the pandemic. But not necessarily all bad news. They are more, apparently, according to this Match.com study, they're more interested in establishing a connection and developing long-term relationships and love. But what we're seeing, according to this study, only 11% of singles now want to date casually. The pandemic, for however, whatever, if that's fear of mortality or anything else, people seem to be interested in looking at long-term relationships than ever before. So maybe we won't see that baby boom, but maybe we will see sustained relationships going forward. It'll be interesting to see. I did have, as a patient, a divorce attorney, he was in a practice that they did lots of different things, but they had a family lawyer in that practice. And they, at least, again, this is anecdotal, what they were seeing in that office, a big spike in separations and divorces during the pandemic. So, yeah, for what that's worth. All right, speaking of sex, let's talk about Viagra. The erectile dysfunction drug sildenafil is the generic name of that medication. And it may have a role in preventing Alzheimer's disease. Study out of the Cleveland Clinic published in Nature Aging. What they did is they looked at insurance records for 7 million people, more than 7 million people. And what they were looking at, they looked at all different types of medications, but those that specifically might have an effect on the brain, and specifically with the brain, medications that might affect amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tau tangles that are thought to be related to brain degeneration and brain deterioration associated with Alzheimer's disease. And so the one that they found out did that the best was sildenafil, or Viagra. And Viagra has been shown in studies other than this one to be good for memory and overall cognitive function. And the reason it's thought to be better is that it increases what's called neurogenesis, or the growth and development of nerve tissue. It also may be good for decreasing inflammation in the brain. Well, what they found was that Viagra reduced the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 70%. 70. Huge number. Now, this study is an association study. It doesn't definitely say, hey, if you take Viagra, you're going to lower your risk of Alzheimer's, but there is a link. And the reason they think there may be something to this is that what they found, sildenafil or Viagra, increases brain cell growth, and it decreases hyperphosphorylation of the tau proteins that leads to those neurofibrillary tangles that we see in patients with Alzheimer's. So this may be something that in the next couple of years, we might see sildenafil repurposed not just as Viagra, but as another and Viagra, sildenafil, is actually used as another drug for pulmonary hypertension, but we might start to see it as a drug for cognitive function and reducing the risk of dementia. And this is a big deal because almost 6 million Americans have Alzheimer's disease. So this could be a potential game changer. This is one to kind of keep an eye on over the next couple of years. because it could be a game changer. All right, something else that could play a role as far as Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive decline is your diet. And there was a study, this is another one I just did on TV recently. There was a study published in the journal Neurology that looked at the type of diet that people ate, ranked that diet according to the Diet Inflammatory Index. It's this scale or system, an algorithm that basically gives you an assessment of how inflammatory your diet is and all the different foods in it. And what they found is the people that consumed more pro-inflammatory foods were at higher risk for dementia and cognitive decline. So basically, the less processed foods you ate, the more nutrient-dense foods you ate, the lower your risk of dementia. So what is that? Well, an anti-inflammatory diet would be things like fewer fried foods, less alcohol, less sugar, less refined fibers and more whole grain, less refined grains, more whole grains, less trans fats. It would be more monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats. It would be minimally processed foods, not the foods in bags or boxes. It would be whole fruits and vegetables. It would be fresh meat, fresh seafood, fresh poultry. All of those would be what's considered an anti-inflammatory diet. Good for all kinds of health reasons, but looks like could be potentially good for lowering your risk of dementia, lowering your risk of cognitive decline, potentially Alzheimer's. Now, I bring that up because I read this fascinating article. It wasn't a research study so much as it was an article that took on nutritional science and specifically one particular nutritionist. There's a nutritionist out of Harvard, I think her name's Uma Naidoo, Naidoo, who wrote a book, apparently very popular on Amazon, called This Is Your Brain on Food. And the rebuttal to her premise that certain foods increase your risk of brain issues and that are bad for brain health is a guy named David Lightsey, who wrote a book called The Myths About Nutritional Science. He's affiliated with some site called Quackology.com, and he basically looks at her arguments and points out the flaws in her arguments. And we've talked a little bit about some of the issues with nutritional studies, and the one I've harped on a lot is always pay attention to who funds the study, and that may bias the results a little bit. So I want to talk about some of her claims, and I'll tell you where he's coming from and how I agree with him, but then have a little bit of a caveat to that. So some of the foods she says that affect your brain health, and these are things that are bad for inflammation, are added sugars in foods, fried foods, and specifically fried chicken, which I think is funny. The title of his article, Fried Chicken and Dementia, Will the Nonsense Ever End? And I looked at some of his other articles. They always have provocative titles like that. And then high glycemic load carbohydrates. And basically, his arguments about the studies that she cites are fairly consistent. For example, the one about sugar is bad, especially added sugar, is really bad for your brain, and is that it largely comes from a study on Malaysia. And he points out, and she says that, hey, they add a lot of sugar to their diets. He points out Malaysia, one of the highest prevalences of obesity and sedentary lifestyles, and that compounds your risk. Is it the sugar, or is it your sedentary lifestyle and obesity that's bad for your brain? He talks about, with both the sugars, the fried foods, and the high glycemic index carbs, that these studies largely rely on dietary history questionnaires, that basically people try to remember what all they ate, and then they sort of go back and try to say that, you know, this risk factor is associated with this, and that those are highly, highly unreliable. People don't remember what they eat, they lie, all sorts of that kind of stuff. But then a lot of these studies, no discussion of did the people smoke, how much alcohol they drink, did they use drugs, lifestyle habits, sedentary lifestyle, and exercise. And then some of the studies that she uses are animal studies, especially rodent studies, and those don't necessarily correlate. And I will say that all of that is generally true, not just for cognitive decline and brain health, but nutritional studies largely do rely on these large population-based studies, food questionnaires, and things like that. Here's why. It's impossible to do a double-blind, placebo-controlled randomized controlled trial of nutrition. You can't put hundreds of people in a group that eats red meat every day and 100 people or more that don't eat red meat and assign people based on some random number generator that says, nope, you've got to eat red meat every day. And it doesn't have to be red meat. It could be alcohol. It could be, hey, we're going to, you eat only fried foods. You only eat or only drink soft drinks. That's no institutional review board is ever going to approve that kind of study. It is impossible to do. It'd be great if you could get that. And yes, you can do that in animals. But again, animal studies don't necessarily correlate to humans. But then also there's all sorts of other variables. You have to control for smoking and how much people exercise and how much alcohol they drink and do they sit all day and so many other things that make nutritional studies just about impossible to definitely prove this causes that. Fried foods cause dementia. Sugars cause dementia in this case. It's very hard. So I agree with everything he's saying. It's very, very hard to design studies that definitively prove a link because those studies just can't be done. These types of studies that we're doing, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, the huge database that's been going on for decades to try to track these variables, that's probably the best we have. But all those can show is a link that this is linked. We talked about Viagra being linked to a reduced risk of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. Doesn't say that it causes you to have, prevent that. And that's the same with nutrition studies. So always just kind of keep that in mind when you see these studies of, avocados. We're going to talk about avocados in the show next week. Avocados are associated with less risk of that. Just know that these are links, that they're not cause and effect. So for what that's worth. All right, pivot now a little bit to workouts. Really interesting study. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of this, but a study that was just published this month in Neurology, the Journal of the American Academy of Neurology, looked at exercise and how it was beneficial for your brain, and then depending on where you lived, if you were exposed to a lot of air pollution, did that negate the effects of benefits of exercise? Exercise is good for long-term brain health. What you want with your brain when you study the anatomic structures of the brain, you want more gray matter volume and you want decreased white matter hyperintensity. So what they found is exercise is terrific for those. Exercise is good for your gray matter volume. The people in this study, the ones that got the most vigorous exercise every week, their average gray matter volume was 800 cubic centimeters. In those that didn't exercise vigorously, it was only 790 cubic centimeters. Exercise and air pollution didn't really affect gray matter volume, but where gray matter or air pollution mattered is that in those white matter hyperintensity. Again, exercise was really good at reducing the white matter hyperintensity. That's a good thing. But in people that did exercise in areas of high air pollution, you did not see those decreases in white matter hyperintensity. And so basically, exercising in somewhere with a lot of air pollution, you still got benefits of exercise on your brain, but not nearly as much as if you exercised in areas with low air pollution. So, that's hard to, short of moving, which, you'd love to do, but it isn't always possible. Yes, you want to get outside, but if you're in a very, crowded city with lots of air pollution, that potentially could be detrimental. Now, what you don't know is, would you be better off indoors on a treadmill, or would you be better outdoors getting some of that nitrogen dioxide and things like that? We don't know, but it is something to know. If you live in a crowded place, try to find times of day where the pollution isn't bad. Maybe get out to the countryside if that's all at all possible, but something to think about and worth more study. All right, something else that I feel like I have a little bit of personal experience with, and I know people have tried, is this idea of fasted workouts, doing your workouts on empty stomachs while you're fasting. A lot of people have tried to do it to lose body fat. The one I always talk about is that was a big thing with Alex Rodriguez and Jennifer Lopez before they got married or were about to get married. They never did get married. They did fasted cardio so that they would look good for their weddings. And so a lot of people have done it, do cardio first thing in the morning before you eat breakfast, and that's going to help burn fat. There is a study looking at whether or not it would be a good thing from an endurance standpoint. And it was a study done by Danish researchers published in the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition that calls into question whether or not it's a good thing. The theory is this, is that if you're exercising in a fasted state, your body has to learn to burn fats for endurance, and overall that would help your endurance. It's also thought that fasted workouts boost your mitochondria. If you remember from high school biology, the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. So in theory, that would be good for energy production. But what these researchers found, and they basically looked at all the study looking at fasted workouts and carb-depleted workouts, and then looked at activity performance, sports performance, exercise performance, and they found that they didn't work, that the cons outweighed the benefits. Basically, it compromised their training quality. They couldn't train at high intensities, even for short periods of time. I will say that I have noticed something similar. So for years, I tried a keto diet, a high fat, low carb diet. And there was a period of time a couple of years ago where I was working with a former sprinter, actually one of the fastest humans ever. He beat Usain Bolt 3 times, and he works with a lot of people now. And I did for 3 or 4 months this training program where, in addition to lifting weights, I was doing these track workouts 4, 5, 6 days a week. And I had to get off keto pretty quickly because I was really struggling in those track workouts. Those weren't long endurance workouts. They were lots of sprints and just high intensity interval training essentially, but on a track. And I had to switch to one with more carbs because I was really struggling through those workouts. Once I switched to adding more carbs, was able to do those a lot better. Again, that's anecdotal. Take that for what you want. Try it yourself if you want. But these researchers at least feel that fasted workouts, low carb, may not be necessarily the way to go for sports performance. All right. Another study that came out of Harvard was looking at overall what does exercise and physical activity do. And this is really going to summarize a lot of what we've talked about throughout this show since we started this summer. One is its effect on cardiovascular disease and heart disease. The leading cause of death among women, one of the leading causes of death overall in humans, especially as you get older. This study out of Harvard basically shows the more you exercise, the more physical activity you get throughout the day, whether it's exercise or just being physically active, moving around, the more you do, the lower your risk of cardiovascular disease. Improves your health status, improves your function, regardless of age or any other medical conditions. But it's not just your heart. Here, just a list of some of the things. We've talked about some of these sort of indirectly. If you're trying to quit smoking, it keeps your mind off smoking, making you more likely to be able to quit smoking. Better for controlling your appetite. If people exercise, you're less likely to just munch throughout the day. Helps you lose weight, helps you keep weight off, more energy, more stamina throughout the day, lower blood pressure, higher HDL, that's the good cholesterol, better blood sugar control based on its effect on insulin. But not just physical health, it's good for your mental health as well. People who exercise on a regular basis, less stress, less anxiety and depression, better mood, and better quality of sleep. So if you have watched this show for any period of time and you've heard me talk about exercise, please, please, please start exercising. I played sports growing up, so I didn't exercise per se, like just go out and run, just go out and lift weights. I played soccer, basketball, swam, all this kind of stuff. But when I stopped, I had to start exercising and was mostly running and lifting weights. And I will tell you, not just the physical health benefits, because I was a teenager, but the mental health benefits and the ability to study for exams and everything else, it made an amazing difference in my life. So I strongly agree with that. So if you haven't started exercising, but with the new year coming up, you'd like to start, how could you start to work out? All right. There is a study that was done that was published in the journal Nature by, the lead author was somebody named Katie Milkman, who has one of my favorite podcasts called Choiceology. It's a behavioral science podcast. You know, I love behavioral science and finding ways to make people more likely to do certain things, and in my case, health. She's fantastic. Definitely check out her podcast. Definitely read her book. It's called How to Change. It just came out last summer. It's fantastic. But both her and it was like 30 different behavioral scientists across the country studied 60,000 people who work out at least a little bit, going to gyms in the United States, trying to figure out what interventions can make you more likely to go and then more likely to stick with the habit. First of all, the thing that's important to know is it's fairly easy to get people to start exercising. It's very difficult to keep people to stick with it, to get them to stick with it. But they came up with some things that at least seem to be ways to both start and maintain the habit. So these are things you might, if you're doing a New Year's resolution, it has anything to do with exercise, here are some things you might think about. One, in fact, the most successful habit they found, we've all heard about maintaining the streak, the Jerry Seinfeld thing, where you get a calendar, you do whatever your behavior is, you put an X on it, and your goal is to put an X every single day. You do that habit every day. You don't break the streak. But let's be fair. You're going to have days where you can't get to the gym, you can't go out for a run for whatever reason. The key is to not miss it again. It's okay to miss one day, but you don't want to miss two. And so one of the interventions that had the best results was rewarding yourself if you went back to the gym after missing a day. Now, you're not going to pay yourself necessarily, but that maybe you work with a partner, an accountability partner, and if you do miss a day, the partner reminds you, you go the next day and you come up with some kind of reward, whether that's a treat, whether that's, get to watch a show, whatever that is, but reward yourself for getting back to exercise after you miss a day. That can be very, very helpful. Another one is something that I love called temptation bundling. Now, I've made exercise a habit. I don't need to do this anymore, but I probably could use it for other things. But temptation bundling is basically rewarding yourself with something you like while you're exercising. So maybe you have a favorite podcast or a favorite TV show. The show that I'm into now is called The Capture. It's on Peacock, and I think in England it's on BBC One. Love this show. It's a thriller. Love it. Just started it, but really like it. If I needed to teach myself to work out, I would not watch that at home. I would only allow myself to watch that on my phone or on a tablet while I'm exercising at the gym, or only listening to that podcast while I'm exercising. That's called temptation bundling. You don't allow yourself to do it in free time. You only do it during exercise, makes you more likely to do it. Other things, making a plan, setting that exercise at a specific time every day. That's when you're supposed to do it. Put it in your calendar and then have reminders throughout the day. Have your calendar app do it, or some kind of reminder app on your phone to make sure that you go. Another one that they found success with is somehow being reminded that more and more people are exercising and the numbers keep getting more. Now, you could have an app just lie to you, and I don't know about lie to you, but to tell you that on a regular basis. But the way I would do that is, again, getting in a group, whether it's a Facebook group or other social media, where people are talking about their exercise on a regular basis, and just follow people on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or wherever else that constantly talk about exercise, constantly being exposed to people that exercise on a regular basis. And last, for those of you that are going to be setting New Year's resolutions, make your goals achievable. Small steps every day. If you say, all right, I'm going to go exercise for an hour every day, or 90 minutes every day, or 2 hours every day, I can promise you, you may start it, but you're not going to stick with that. There is no chance you will do that. Maybe the first few days it's just walking a block around your neighborhood. Then when you advance, maybe you're just running 1/10 of a mile or 1/4 of a mile, but starting with something small that you can maintain until it becomes a habit, and then increase from there. So if you start a New Year's resolution, I would love to hear what you do to stick to it. I am fascinated by that behavioral science of this, the behavioral economics of this, because it's not just, I can tell you all I want about, and I have earlier today, about all the benefits of exercise, that's not more likely to make you do it. We need, as healthcare professionals, to teach people ways that make it easier for you to do that health behavior, in this case, exercise. And so those are some of the things you might think about. And the last thing I'm going to talk about just real quickly, University of Michigan and UCSF study, University of California, San Francisco, found that gratitude, being grateful, is good for your health. What they did is they studied cell phone data for people in the US, Australia, Hong Kong, and India, that also, in addition to tracking their cell phone and getting questions asked of them throughout the day, rating things like, in uncertain times, I usually expect the best, I have so much in life to be thankful for, but they measured their blood pressure, measured their heart rates, and what they found, this may surprise you, people who are more grateful had lower heart rates, lower blood pressure, and increased feelings of appreciation towards other people. So being grateful throughout the day, and just in general, whether that's writing down three things you're grateful for every morning, whether it's writing three things that good that happened during the day, you do that before you go to bed, whether it's just some reminder on your phone, that taking a picture of something you like and being grateful for that. There's lots of strategies to increase gratitude, but it's not just good for your mental health and happiness, it's good for your physical health. All right. Let's see. Any questions, comments out there for this last episode for 2021? Rhonda says, ask your physical therapist. I don't remember what topic that may have been pertaining to. I missed that, but I am a big, big fan of physical therapy. Temptation bundling is huge. Probably good for all kinds of things, not just exercise, but... and I'm not a real big fan of just personally for steady state cardio. I kind of find elliptical and that kind of stuff, kind of stationary bikes, really boring. But if I was trying to make myself start exercising and there was some show that came on every day or some podcast, I absolutely would do it just to get in the habit. I think that can be a good thing. Edgar talks about ACL surgery, allograft. Yeah, and maybe that's what Rhonda was talking about, physical therapy, because he's talking about his leg is straighter, and that can be tricky. You've got to get motion back very, very quickly after ACL surgery, because once that gets stiff, it is really hard to get full extension especially, but full flexion back. And if you don't have full extension, it is really hard to walk normally. All right. Delightful. I appreciate that. She says, thanks for, I assume that's she, maybe it's not. Thanks for making these. I really appreciate it. Robert, I don't know enough about N-acetylcysteine. I'm going to have to look that up, quite honestly. I know that the supplement company that our practice uses, it's a really great lab, very, very pure supplements. N-acetylcysteine, I'm pretty sure, is a component of a couple of their supplements. I don't know enough about it, but I promise I will look that up and get back to you. Attitude of gratitude changes the perception of your day. If you begin it that way, set the alarm on the phone, 3 minutes, do nothing but give thanks. I love that. I have gotten bad about gratitude journaling first thing in the morning. I did it for a couple of years, and I really loved it. And there are actually gratitude journals that make you sort of fill it in the morning and at night. I can't say enough. What I will tell you, I haven't talked about it on this show. All right, so in my pants that I have, I don't know if you can see this. This is a top. I can't show you the desk, but like you spin. Mine's made out of black zirconium. Actually, I got it from a company called Forever Spin. And I'm not going to get into the history of why I carry a top. There's a specific reason. But I use it, I put it in my pocket, and if I grab my keys or, and I feel it, and I'm really good about this, but I do miss sometimes. But whenever I grab it or whenever I put it in my pants pocket, I try to make myself think of something I'm grateful for. And where I've ironically found that it works the best is if I'm in a crappy meeting with somebody I really don't like, or it's about a subject where it's just going to make me mad, I like to grab it and think of something positive, something I'm grateful for. It is great for getting through those bad meetings. All right, that is all I've got as far as topics for today. I am grateful that you're here. Heading into 2022, because again, this is the last show of 2021. I am slowly working in January, February, to make this a daily show, or at least a weekday show. Every day, Monday through Friday at 12 Eastern time, I'm trying to increase the point that I can be here every day. It won't always be a show like this. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, it'll always be a show that we talk about new studies about health and wellness. Now, I may try out all sleep studies one day, all nutrition studies one day, that kind of thing. I'm still playing around with that. But what's coming is on Mondays, and I don't know if this will be the first Monday, but certainly one of the first few, it'll be Modern Medicine Monday, where I talk about some of the newer medical treatments out there, not always insurance approved, but some of the cutting edge type things that can help with overall health and wellness, but especially can help with orthopedic issues. On Fridays, I will get back to, on a regular basis, doing Ask Dr. Geier, where you can ask me things like N-acetylcysteine. You can ask me things about, like Edgar did, about ACL surgeries and any kind of orthopedic problem or thing that you might have. Again, I'm not giving medical advice, but I can give you my thoughts on particular surgeries, particular treatments, particular injuries that might help you make decisions that help you recover from that injury. And then Wednesdays, this will probably be the slowest one to add. I am trying to get to add Will It Work Wednesday. And I got this idea because I keep getting companies that reach out to me, say, hey, can you do a video promoting our product? And I'm not really all that big on promoting things, especially paid promotions or things like that. But there's so many products that are out there in the health and fitness space that people want to know, does this actually help? I mean, you should see my closet and various parts of my house. I have all these things I've bought, for core strength or things for building your abs. I've got tons. I've got way more than I can ever use. Some of them are recovery and all these kinds of things. And I'd like to start these videos where I use them for a week or use them for a month and tell you my thoughts on how well they work based on science and based on my experience with it. So those will come. Those will take a little bit longer because I got to use them for a period of time. But that's where we're headed. I am also potentially starting at night, not so much health and wellness, but I'm going to do, after a lot of requests and some other things I'm working on, start to talk about injuries in pro and college athletes, for people who like to bet on sports, people who like to play fantasy sports, for people that just care about players on their favorite team, what it means when they get hurt. Those will be a little more informal, a little more fun, probably maybe 7 p.m. Eastern a lot of nights, maybe before big football games, big basketball games, things like that. That one is coming as well. So if you like the health and wellness thing, join us every day, noon Eastern time in 2022. If you like to know what your favorite athletes suffer, some of these injuries, definitely check out. That's probably going to be called That's Gotta Hurt Live, because that's the title of my book back in 2017, That's Gotta Hurt, The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever. Look for that as well. I am very, very thankful for all of you. Edgar, thank you for being here. And you too, have a blessed day and a blessed year. All of you, thank you so much for being here. Whether you're watching live, watching Better Than Ever, or if you're listening to Better Than Ever live as a podcast, very, very grateful for you. This has been so much fun this year, and I'm so looking forward to next year. Have a very happy new year, and I will see you very early at the start of 2022.